Welcome to Let's Talk About It, a podcast created by students for students. There's a lot of talking going on these days, but oftentimes that talk seems empty. We're searching for real, genuine conversation. We want a space where we're able to talk about everything from the serious to the seemingly mundane and see how faith informs that conversation. Have something on your mind? We do. So let's talk about it.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. We've been in this series, the 10 Commandments of 2020. We're on episode 8 now as we get to tackle the Seventh Commandment in 2020. And I am joined with
Aiden
and
Clayton.
And guys, we've been walking through this for a while, so it might be a little redundant at this point. But we think about this series or what we're trying to do here. Just help us out. 10 Commandments in 2020. What are we all about in this conversation?
We are just trying to unwrap the world through the 10 Commandments and just trying to find new ways to understand life as it is.
Yeah, right now here in 2020 and trying to see how do we understand the world, or how's the 10 Commandments helping us understand our role in 2020. And it flashes back to that first episode we had of really 10 Commandments shows who we are, who we were created to be. Certainly partners with the gospel to convicts us, shows us that we're sinners. But this other reminder of who we've been called to be and how do we react to a world that's so crazy and falling apart when we're jumping into this. And we're at episode 8, Seventh Commandment. So I guess just get us started here, Aiden. If you'll read that Seventh Commandment, nice and short, nice and quick here.
You shall not steal.
You shall not steal. Okay, so I know this is going to...
What does that mean?
I know, right? It's going to feel like a really dumb one to ask, but I mean, what comes to mind when you think about the Seventh Commandment?
Don't steal.
What is? Oh, so even what does that mean, though? I mean, what are some of the things you remember as you talked about this? Maybe, again, we've talked about the confirmation process a little bit. Maybe some listeners are listening that haven't really walked through something about that, but you've learned about the 10 Commandments before. What do you remember about you shall not steal?
Just like don't take others' possessions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like whatever is yours, it's yours, and don't take other people's stuff because you put your name on it. It's like Woody from Toy Story.
I put my name on the bottom of your shoe.
Like Andy from Toy Story, writing the name on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Woody's got Andy's name on the
Exactly,
bottom.
so you know he's Andy's, right?
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
We probably shouldn't get into that, though.
What's up?
He's owning something else.
Who's owning something else?
Oh, never mind. Woody was always seemed like a real person to me.
Oh, I got you. Okay, and so Woody had his own things too. All right, so I know when I thought about when I was a kid, this is basically the don't steal gum line, right? Don't go take something from the convenience store, that kind of thing. So I think there's a bigger expanded meaning to a lot of this stuff too, and that's where Clayton, you kind of already said, well, what does that mean, or what is this? So actually, Luther kind of helps us with this. So let's just dive on into that, and Clayton, if you actually just read that for us, what does this mean for you shall not steal?
We should fear and love God so that we do not take our neighbor's money or possessions or get them in any dishonest way, but help him to improve and protect his possessions and income.
Okay, awesome. So when you hear that or when you see that, what is standing out to you about those? Because it goes a little beyond just don't take other people's things.
Don't take advantage of them.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Even like in certain ways, like just their living space or their property, like I would say first thing comes to mind, like property value type deal. Don't take advantage of them just because they might not know exactly what everything is. You know what I mean?
Sure. So that's that dishonest way thing. So don't take advantage of them just because they're like, I think back like when I was a kid and my brother still hates me for this, actually, my little brother. Have y'all heard of Pokemon cards? Like, this is before Pokemon Go. There were cards. Yeah. So when we were little elementary school kids, super popular. And I had a friend, right? And I'm 4 years older than my little brother. And I had a friend who was around my age in the neighborhood, or at least he would come in the summers to visit with his grandparents. And I remember apparently he still holds it over my head. And I should ask for forgiveness from God for this, I guess. But because it's breaking the Seventh Commandment. My buddy was trying to get some of my brother's cards, and he was going to trade him some. It wasn't the best trade. We'll put it that way, right? So maybe my brother had a super good card and like a holographic card or whatever, and my buddy was going to trade him some pretty good cards, but certainly maybe not a fair trade or something like that. But I convinced my brother to be able to trade those cards because he was my friend and things like that. But I was taking advantage of my little brother's thing, and he was trusting me because I was his brother and things like that. So it's talking about that kind of a thing. So just because you can get something from someone doesn't mean that you should, right? And this is the elementary school level of it. And I do feel bad actually now that I'm talking about that. Like I feel a little bad for however old I was, like 10, 11, 12, ripping my little brother off. But like, so what comes to mind then too when you think about other ways people do that? It's not just stealing, but
car salesman.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Your salespeople.
Well, and that's what actually, when I bought my first car when I was going to Vicarage. So I was 4 years into seminary. And I remember in my last year of seminary sitting down, I was calculating car payments. And I shared this at the Financial Peace for Teens class that we had here at Trinity upstairs here. And I remember calculating out the payments and realizing, and I was going to be able to pay it off pretty quick. I was really happy for that. But realizing how much money I was going to owe for the car versus what it was worth when I first paid for it. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at my buddy and I kind of had my face sideways and I was like, trying to think and process through, and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, it's usury. And I was like, yeah, like this is really messed up. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually hard for me to trust people in insurance or things like that, knowing that that's what they do really, is they're taking advantage of the idea of, and it's all fair, right? Because you're borrowing their money. And so the whole interest piece, and like making sure that's good, and so they're making money off of it. But at the end of the day, it's who can make the most money out of it, mm-hmm. and it's hard for me to trust them. I don't necessarily blame them; they're making a living, but it's still tough, especially when it comes to car loans. And so I'm still like,
well, that's like a lot of companies, like banks or like you said, insurance companies or anything like that. Like you said, with the interest, it's just everywhere.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, if you go beyond that, it's even simpler stuff like furniture stores or electronic stores, or hey, you only have to pay this monthly payment, or you only have to do this, or actually it's 10 months free or something like that. Well, interest is going to go nuts and you're going to owe a whole lot more than what it's worth. And again, it's someone, and there's probably people listening to this, like that's my business you're talking about. And I'm just saying for me, it would be hard for me to go into that business. Again, not necessarily judging you for doing it. You maybe have a different perspective, but it's part of this right here that it's like, I feel dishonest if I were to do something like that. I'd be like, you need to pay this money back to me or you're not getting it. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's just an interesting world. And I think, this is obviously going to the conversation about finances and things like that. And in 2020, like, what do you think of when you think of this kind of stuff?
Well, I was going to take it back for a second. I was going to say another thing that I thought was kind of interesting about the what does this mean part. Mm-hmm. The fact that it says to help and improve and protect your possessions or his possessions and income, so your neighbor's possessions and income and stuff like that. So basically, you shouldn't try to take their stuff, but you should help them to keep it safe and to make sure that, it doesn't get taken by anybody else, kind of thing.
Should have their back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge piece of what Luther's doing in each of these, which I really appreciate, right? Because a lot of people look at the 10 Commandments and it's the big don't do it list. And the reality is, what Luther's doing is kind of expanding it, right? There's the side that you look at this and you think like me and those Pokemon cards, right? And you're like, oh, man, I've fallen short. I've done this wrong. I need to go to Jesus with it. And then there's the other side of that guiding piece that's saying, hey, yeah, it's a don't do this, but it's also a do this. Like, look at who you should be and what you should be doing, or you could be doing, right? And it's more of an encouragement than a defeating piece to it too. So I think you're totally on board there of this positive side of, so what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to help my neighbor with his possessions and his income, both. And it's interesting, it says both protect and improve, actually. So I feel actually pretty good that we offer that financial peace stuff here, because I think it helps show students even at a young age what not to do and walk through it. And it's hard for me to see people that struggle with the finances and stuff like that too. So
do you think a part of that, like that definition, by doing that, that's fulfilling the commandments? By like not necessarily just not like stealing or whatever, but helping to improve, is that a fulfillment of?
Well, so I would counter with, what do you mean by fulfillment?
Like, I don't know.
Do you think it's more like a situation type deal?
Yeah.
Well, I asked, what do you mean by fulfillment in the sense of, like, of course, you're asking a Lutheran pastor about the law. and about good works or something like that. And so it's really hard for me to answer because the only good I do is from God, right? That's only the Holy Spirit moving in me. And so there's a level of, Jesus is the only fulfillment of anything. I think it's honoring it. I'll use that word when you're able to do like teach financial peace or help someone out with their money or protect and things like that. You're honoring the seventh commandment. And I think that's a good move to make, and again, whether it's protecting or improving. So if you say to your buddy, actually, this is a good way to put your money or to spend your money to this, or maybe you can save here, like you're honoring the seventh commandment, which I think is a good thing for anybody to honor any of these commandments.
So 2020, what are you thinking where you can see this happening?
Like, see how we got our neighbors back?
Sure.
Well, just the seventh commandment in general, because that's the way these conversations have gone. Listener, if you've been following along with us so far, we kind of walk through, unpack, and again, this is such a short one, right? 4 words. You shall not steal. And so it seems like a pretty quick conversation to get into it, but we kind of talk about what it means, the commandment in general, but then we're trying to look at 2020 and say, where is this coming to life? And how do we apply it in 2020? So Clayton, what are you seeing when you look at 2020, the year we're living in, the situations we're facing and things like that? And we're talking about money, we're talking about possessions, but not just yours, but more specifically your neighbors. Where are you seeing this play out?
Obviously, it's all the time, 24/7. But like, I don't know. Like, I'd say for having your neighbors back and not stealing and stuff like that, you see it a lot in assets that people have and money. So you see that whole money thing comes up a lot. But just like in the way I see it situational. So like in that situation, like, oh, your neighbor's about to sell his house, but like the market's down. They may not pay too much close attention to the market or whatever and how values go up and down.
Oh, sure.
So like you never know when that situation might come along, but like what it says here is like in this commandment, like we should step up and say something if you know if there's a better plan for that person's his how would you say it? His homestead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So values of homes and specifically the interest right now, interest rates are super low. And so I'm in that boat. I've been far too busy in 2020. Initially, I tried to do it to go and refinance because I just bought my house pretty recently. So it's not a big deal for me to refinance at this point. Typically, I've been told refinancing is not a great decision to make. But because of the drastic difference
rates are crazy
in
low.
Insurance rates in our area, at least, I don't know where everybody else is. But it's a good thing to do. And so being able to share that with your neighbor and help them to see that, or like just in general, like I had to trust a lot of people to honor the seventh commandment when I was buying a house, because I had to bring them along and saying, is this a good deal? Is this not a good deal? Is this the right thing? Is it not the right thing? Things like that for sure. And certainly like you kind of started by saying it's just everywhere. And I think that piece comes in when we think about it's just a get what you can mentality in this world right now. Every man for himself, do what you can, especially when people are losing their jobs, especially when people are saying the economy's crashing and things like that. Like you're going to do everything you can to preserve your money. So it almost feels like you're tempted to dishonor in a sense.
Do you think that you can interpret this commandment as like if you waste somebody's time, that's stealing?
So I think I've been told as different viewpoints, right? So particularly if you are on the clock, right? That is a way that you could be stealing. If you are not doing your job when you're on the clock, so you're getting money for doing a job that you're not doing and you're wasting that kind of time, is that dishonoring the seventh commandment? Yes. So that's a piece of it. And is that kind of what you're referring to?
Well,
there?
just like if you're like with the car salesman thing, like they're messing around with you, trying to waste your time to try and get you to buy the more expensive car or something like that. Is that necessarily like, I don't know if that's more of a moral thing or if that's just what is that?
So I think so buying a car is interesting because again we might have people listening who that's their means of living, that's how they get away, and I really don't know because I think a lot of certain professions get a bad rep, and that's in light of the eighth commandment, which is coming next. I want to talk about everybody in the best possible way. Mm-hmm. So I'll put it in this way: is it possible to dishonor the seventh commandment by selling things, right, such as cars or other? Totally. And is it? And it just, you have to just ask your heart. And I know a lot of people go into certain businesses knowing things like that, and not having a problem with it. They say it's a dog eat dog world. I'm going to do what I can. And that's why it's good to find people that are honest, that are getting a good value and know what they're talking about to be able to help you and walk you through processes like that. So I would say if you do go to buy something like a car, get advice from people that you know are good and honest in that department to say, what is the best process? What is the best thing? So, and it is so hard. Even something as simple as buying furniture, right? You can get all the advice in the world, but then you go and they're still trying to sell it. I'm sitting there I remember because I recently bought a chair, right? It was a big deal for me. Bought a chair for my house. And I remember going to get this thing and just wishing like it was a great place. I think it's called The Dump here in Houston.
At The Dump.
And it's a great place to go to, but they have salesmen, right? And it's so hard in our atmosphere to trust a salesman. It really is, because you know that they're benefiting from you buying from them. And so it's so hard. Why can't it just be like everywhere else where I know what the price is? I decide in my head, that's what I want to pay for it, and I do it. So it's actually that whole, and it's interesting. I'll probably get completely schooled by somebody listening to this on why those kind of places still exist. But it goes, and I hate, we were just talking about, listener, how much Pastor Lee talks, but I do have another story for this. And and I was in Israel, right? So my senior year of college, I got to go to Israel. Great experience. But our last day, we got to spend some time in Old Jerusalem. And Old Jerusalem is a marketplace. So there's people trying to sell things constantly. And in the Middle East, it's all bartering. It's all the barter system. And there's this guy, and I was thinking of some friends back home, and I saw some things that I was like, oh, maybe I could get that for a friend or something like that. And so I was in the shop, I was curious. He told me his initial price. And I was like, there's no possible way. There's no way. And I said, no thanks. And for me, the price range was just way too over the top. There was no way I would do it. So I walked away. Well, I don't know where I'm going. I'm passing in ways, the streets are so crowded, things like that. So I don't know which one, but I end up passing, or my friend stop in his shop or something. So I go back by, and he's still at me. And he's like, okay, I'll go to this. And I was like, and at this point, I'm like, maybe I would do it. But in reality, at this point, I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this. Flash forward like 4 or 5 times this happens, like passing by, trying to follow my friends, things like that, or the people that are with me on this trip. He's down to a stupid low price. But at this point, I am so aggravated at the conversation that I'm like, I'm not giving this man my money. And it was, again, just a stupid low price. He was calling me crazy, you stupid American. Like, why would you not do this? Like, you would be robbing me blind anyway. And I was like, at that point, I was just over it. I was tired. I didn't trust him, because how can you go from this high of a price down to this price? And it was like, it was just a nasty experience overall. But as a guy, it felt dishonest, all these other things. And again, someone's out there who's probably going to school me on why this is okay, why this is a good thing. And not just the culture that has that kind of a barter system, but in general here in America too, same thing, whether it's phones and phone plans or all these little extra insurances. You shouldn't want to pay insurance for that. And the reality is, it's bogus. You could just save money and buy a new screen rather than using the insurance or something like that. I don't know. It's a crazy thing. So where else, from me talking forever at this point, where else is coming to mind for you guys in 2020?
People cheating us?
Well, possessions, money, like being dishonest when it comes to money, tricking people in money, 2020, protecting people's possessions, protecting people's income.
I got a good one. So apparently now there is insurance for if you're going to school to pay tuition. So basically, like if you get like deathly sick while you're in school, there's insurance that will pay your tuition off because like of the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah. So basically these people are taking your money so that if you basically are like on your deathbed, you don't have to pay your college tuition.
It's interesting, right? It's one of those fascinating, because I can see the temptation in a sense, right? Because if you get sick and you can't, but if you get sick, can you go to class? Depending on the wave here in Houston, at least, listener, is a lighter version. Most of the people we know, I'm not trying to dismiss at all the seriousness of it. I do know people who have died from it. And so I'm not trying to dismiss that typically in other parts of the country, but here it's at least been a little lighter. So if it's just kind of the light cough, feeling sick, losing taste and smell. And again, right now, that's all we know, but we don't know what the long range of this is going to be. We don't know the side effects. So again, not trying to dismiss it, but if it's even light, like the college can't stop educating you, right? For the most part. So it's kind of an interesting one. But if you do end up having to withdraw from school, see, that's interesting though, because I think even colleges have policies. If you withdraw a certain amount of tuition, they're going to prorate it, things like that.
Right.
But it's interesting that people are trying to take advantage of it. I see it in the church though. Man, it kills me in the church. I actually, for a long time, I didn't listen to Christian music. You know this? Because I felt like they were trying to make a dime on Jesus, you know? And so now in a pandemic.
Lauren Daigle?
Well, like, I mean, that's the thing is now I listen to Christian music. I'm cool with it, things like that. And I get what they're doing and they're passionate for it. But certainly when I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, it felt a little fake, a little hard to listen to and things like that. And certainly now you see some of these people coming out and like, actually, I'm not a believer, stuff like that. And it's rocking some people's worlds. And I'm like, it's not rocking my world because the truth is still the truth. But like now what you see is, and it kind of destroys me a little bit, of people that want to just make a dime off the church. They know that we're hurting. They know we're trying to navigate a crazy world in ministry. And they're like, hey, buy this new thing that I did for the pandemic for you to do church. And it's like, why are you trying to take my money right now? And it's because that's the world we live in, right? You chase money above all things. So go back to the first commandment a little bit too. So so 2020, one of the other big things, right, we were talking about, but that insurance piece is certainly huge. But I mean, think about it, like phone insurance or other insurance. Anything that you buy, they'll ask you if you want to do insurance because they want $12 more. TV insurance, yeah. They want $12 more from you or $25 more. It's only like a 2-year warranty or something. And I'm like, why is it not already have a warranty? It should last this long.
But majority of the warranty won't cover anything that actually might happen to it.
Exactly.
It's basically the phrase nickel and diming.
So how about this? So I'm not hating on Whataburger, just something I've noticed. Okay. So I've noticed
Chick-fil-A.
I love Chick-fil-A, whatever. So, but like I've noticed, like you go to Whataburger sometimes and they'll give you, hey, if you fill out this receipt, you'll get a free Whataburger.
I've gotten it before.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. One of those times at least, I went and what it was is you get a free Whataburger if you pay for a medium fry and medium drink, and it ended up being like
the same price.
I paid less than a $1 of a meal, you know, something like that for what I got. So, or no,
that's still a deal.
Or it was more. I can't remember.
Probably
it was one
more.
Of those. No, I think it was more.
Don't say it was less and then be all upset about it because that's a deal still.
That's true. So I think it was that it was more, and I was like, how did I just do that? I just got tricked. I just got robbed a little bit. So it's something that was like, this isn't an actual deal. It just tricked me into doing this.
Buy everything separate.
Do what now?
Buy everything separate and we'll give you free napkins.
Right, exactly. So it's just all that kind of stuff's really present. But hey, let's talk about another kind of big issue in 2020. I mean, it's a delicate one, and I think even we have to walk a little light when we talk about it. There's been, I think, it's the weird balance, right? We're in a pandemic. Like that's a reality. We should be taking that seriously. We should probably not be gathering in crowds. We should probably not be gathering in masses. And I say this as, I mean, you heard in a previous episode, I've been to one of these protests or gatherings, right? But obviously in parts of the country, they've turned into riots. And there's this level, and it's angering particularly a lot of conservative people. And I think we can say there's a rightful place to talk about it. And I think, again, we talked about in the Fifth Commandment, anger is probably not the right way to go regardless, right? From a Christian standpoint, again, the rest of the world's going to act like the rest of the world's going to do. But from a Christian standpoint, anger is not a great thing, but the destruction of property. All right. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's like you're destroying your hometown and, you know, your everything that, you know, you shop at and places you go to, you know, you're almost not destroying your neighbor's stuff. You're almost just destroying your stuff kind of thing. But in a sense, you are destroying your neighbor's stuff. And so that does have a part in this. And to a degree, I can understand, you know, the anger that is behind these riots and these protests, mainly the riots, because the protests are mostly peaceful. But I can understand the anger and the frustration with the topic that's going on. But, you know, to a certain degree, you have to understand that destroying stuff isn't going to get you anywhere.
Sure, yeah. And what's interesting, and I think this is how we can kind of talk about it, is that when I went to Houston, again, I was curious. I wanted to see what was going on. I wanted to see how it went. And what was really cool to me is the guys leading the protest, walking front line with George Floyd's family, they said at the very beginning, keep your eyes out. anybody starts destroying stuff, that's not us. You stop it. You help us. This is about this. This is about this. So I was so proud of our city that day. I thought Houston did such a great job. We're not one of the cities where there's been a ton of destruction or anything like that. Actually, and even the reports going into that march, because it was so important for this, again, we'll go to the movement, not the organization, but for this movement of trying to find justice, to find some police reform and things like that. There was the warnings of people setting out bricks, right? People trying to set up destruction of property to make people look bad and things like that. And again, we'll get to talk a little bit more about this in the Eighth Commandment. It's going to be really exciting about how do you understand things? How do you take some sides? But that protest was saying, like, look, we are not violent. That is not what we're about. But the reality is some people are doing that. And then the people that, and this is the stuff that trends on TikTok, the stuff that trends on Twitter, and the stuff that certainly trends on Facebook, are the people that are taking complete advantage of the situation and just taking things. Like I remember early on, the guy that stole a bunch of Legos. Like, come on, brother. Like, you are just taking advantage of the fact that the store is being broken into, you can get a bunch of free stuff. Totally dishonoring Seventh Commandment in that case. And let's go ahead and do this too. Like, this is not new, right? Where else do we see this? Houston. Where else do we see looting? Where else do we see stuff like that?
Houston.
What's Houston known for?
Stealing.
And we're not talking about the Astros.
Children.
Oh,
what do we?
That's a sensitive topic right there.
I'm sorry, it's still too soon.
No, that's not funny.
No. But what are we? So no, seriously, what are we known for? What is something that happens every 4 years, every 6 years, every whatever years?
I have no idea what you're talking
Hurricanes. Okay, so hurricanes and flooding.
That happens like every year.
Yes, right. We'd go through neighborhoods and we'd see like people writing on their garage doors saying, if you loot, we have guns here type stuff.
Exactly.
People would take advantage of those who like are less fortunate.
One of the first, like in my lifetime at least, public events was Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And again, you saw people are taking advantage of the situation, taking stuff like that. And that's what I was getting to, is hurricanes. That's what Houston's known for.
So confused.
Yeah, I know. I do that. My little brother hates me for that.
You said stealing.
Well, and it was the looting piece.
Hurricanes.
The looting, the rioting, the looting.
Yes, I understand where you're going from, but
exactly.
that was a
total
was a
circle.
shot in
My
the dark.
brain, listener, if you don't know, my brain is very.
It's two different sports
thinking
going
at
on
20
there.
different like speeds, and I love connecting a million dots, but I'm not good at vocalizing those connecting dots. But we're there now. We're there. So this idea of property, though, and it's someone else's stuff, it's someone else's livelihood. And again, I'm not. I am, though. Okay, I'm trying to honor this. I was about to say I'm not so upset about Target, but the reality is I am, right? Because that was the big one in Minneapolis, the big Target store that got hit. But the reality is that is still someone else's property, and that's someone else's possessions and someone else's money.
Someone
even though they
else's
have
job.
a ton of it, even though they have an absolute ton of it, it's someone else's job. You're right. And so it's someone else's welfare, it's someone else's well-being. And so I need to be a little not okay with that. And not a little bit, but not okay with it according to the Seventh Commandment and what it says. So it's, again, what a complex world to live in. Because I love what you did, Aiden, of talking about that anger is very real, and I cannot dismiss that anger. I can't. But the reality, let's go just flash back to that Fifth Commandment conversation, though, of so for us as Christians, at least, we have to ask, what do we do with that anger? And again, that was a conversation. Go back and listen to that episode if you're curious for that one. But yeah, and again, we can't expect people outside of the church, outside of the family of God, to really appreciate that. We can certainly call for justice, though, in society, and try to protect and help our people in that nature. All right, so we've been talking about a little bit how this is certainly going to connect when we come back around to the 9th and 10th commandments in the final episode. But really, that's what we are seeing. And where do you think? This is probably an important one as we start to close down the conversation. Why do you think people do this? Why does stealing happen? Why is there the temptation to take or to get something in a dishonest way?
Because we're in a sinful world.
Okay, don't give me the Jesus answer. Don't give me the Sunday school answer.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to steal stuff.
Expand on that.
It's our society. It's like it's the culture we're creating.
Yeah, because like literally, like we're sitting in the podcast room right now. If you didn't know, but for example, there are 3 cameras sitting on the table right in front of us, and it would be so easy to just pick it up and leave with it instead of paying, a few $100 or $1,000 for a brand new camera. It's just easy to just do it the dishonest way than it is to do it the honest way. and to make the money to be able to do that kind of thing. It's just easier for a lot of people to just be like, it's right there. Why don't I just take it? Why does it have to cost money? Why do I have to, try and work for it? Why have that kind of thing when I could just do it now?
Yeah. Are you relating to that one? Or are you with that
Yeah,
one?
pretty much hand in hand with that one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting too, because actually when I went through confirmation, however long ago, right? I remember seeing it like when my friends would play poker. I'm actually not good. So people are learning this about me now. Well, no, I'm not.
Your poker face just seems like it'd just be so good.
It's not necessarily about the game. It's about I almost get anxiety when you're playing for money. I'm not kidding you, because when I learned this, that's how I adapted it. Was I don't care that we're all throwing our money in the middle. If I win, I'm taking your money, and I don't feel good about that, And so that's why I'm awful at poker, because I've just got anxiety the whole time of I'm either throwing my money away, which is a strong chance, right? Or I'm taking someone else's. Mm-hmm. And certainly knowing like the gambling addictions can become a thing, and that is, people do lose their livelihoods, lose everything when they gamble a lot of times. And so that's hard for me. And again, I don't think Scripture, the Catechism certainly doesn't deal with gambling, because I thought it did, because that's what I thought I learned when I was in confirmation. But I have a hard time with that. I mean, I grew up in Georgia. They have the lottery, and it's the same conversation of you're either throwing your money away or you're taking someone else's, Mm-hmm. And so it's just an interesting place.
Like Powerball?
Something like that. Yeah. Or the scratch ticket, stuff like that.
Okay,
yeah. So it's just that. It was hard for me. I mean, again, I don't know if it's sinful or not, right? I need to talk to some of my pastor buddies to confirm. But for me, it's hard for me. That's at least where I'm going to land today on that one is that question of, well, how about I just go and earn my money honestly instead of trying to throw it to chance and take someone else's, Well,
it's funny you say lottery, though, too, because, like, they're pretty much just taking people's money. Like, they're making a profit off that.
Exactly.
And majority of the people are just throwing their money away.
Well, and certainly in Georgia, how do you justify it? All that goes towards education. So it makes it sound like so great, but the reality is, I mean, the same thing for significant organizations. Again, most of them are making money in a somewhat honest way, but at a certain point, there's a dishonest level of how much wealth it seems like you're getting for yourself. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about just the billions imagine $1 billion. And you have to ask at some point, is there an honest way to get $1 billion? Like, you start to think about it, right? Because somehow some people aren't getting what they deserve, right? At some level. And I'm not trying to be a socialist. And I'm not trying to be crazy here. I'm just asking the question of the Seventh Commandment. And am I truly, and I think for any person has to ask that question, am I paying someone what it's worth? Am I honoring, if I own a business, am I honoring my employees and paying them what they're worth? Am I doing it in any walk of life? Same thing for like when you purchase something, are you paying a good price for it? Things like that. Or are you trying to get the steal? Are you trying to get the thing like that? It's just calling it all up there.
So it's just a lot of greed. Yeah, that's what it all kind of boils down to.
Right. And I think that connects into that original question, because you had said it's easy, but I think it's that greed, of that selfish need, that pursuit of money is ultimately the root of why we steal. Why would we even be tempted to do any of this stuff? Because again, when we really look at it, like, oh yeah, that's not fair. So it's a good thing for us to remind ourselves of actually, I'm not going to pursue. This goes back again, First Commandment. It's going to relate all the way through. Am I putting God at the throne, or am I putting money at the throne? Which one? Because the reality is one of those is going to be there when I die, and one of them's not. Mm-hmm. The money's going to go away. The money's going to rust up. The money's going to burn one day, and you're not going to be able to take it with you when you go. And so what are you truly investing in? And God says, invest in Him, and love your neighbor. And that's ultimately it. So one of the ways that we've been trying to wrap up our conversations in this series is by let's talk about it. We like conversations. We like honest conversations, real conversations, good conversations, and they could be funny. We've laughed along the way, and they can be serious, but they can hopefully bring a little bit more meaning to our lives. So with that, we've been ending each episode by asking the question of, what do you feel like you need to talk more about as a result of this one, or what conversations do you hope you get to have, or that other people get to have? What's coming to mind?
I think for me, just talking more about the positive side of this commandment is to help your neighbors improve and protect their stuff, and not only improve and protect their stuff, but to even help them to stay safe with that. And just not to always look at the negative side of the commandment, because it's not a negative, but it's the law. So like it's kind of like it kind of beats down on you, and it's like,
well, and we talked about in that first episode, it's a good thing, right? Because ultimately it does show you your sin. And
right.
yes, like, I don't know if you know this, listener, but you are a sinner. And don't worry, I am too. You are surrounded by them. Anytime you come to church, people always say the church, what is it? One of my favorite phrases. People say the church is full of sinners, and I have to disagree. I think we got plenty of room, right? Because that's how we acknowledge we've fallen short. And there's a good, even this negative side, right? This downer side points us to Jesus ultimately, who takes care of that sin for us, which is a good thing. But it allows us to look at it in this positive light that you're sharing with us, Aiden.
What do you think, Clayton?
I would say definitely just like, well, no, I forgot.
What conversations you're hoping to have from this, or that you hope other people get to have in relation to this commandment, you shall not steal, and this other people's possessions, things like that?
Well, I hope you think like, I think a big thing comes up is what you're investing in, what you're investing in the spiritual and like, or you're investing in the physical. So like having your neighbor's back, like what Aiden was saying, like being there for your neighbor and like watching him watch his back, don't steal for him. And like at the same time investing with God or whatever and keeping to this commandment. Or are you investing in stealing, taking physical things and being more worried about this physical world?
Exactly. Going after the material stuff, your stuff, focusing more on you than you are God and your neighbor. I think that's a great thing. And hopefully what we're doing, right? And this whole series is the perspective change. So seeing this world through the light of the commandments, seeing yourself, your own life, the way God sees it and the plan that he has for it. And ultimately too, that's kind of what I hope too. I hope you just talk about it. And that's kind of why we did this. I hope you talk about like the reality. So maybe when something happens, you're able to say, bro, don't you feel like they owe a little bit more? You owe them a little bit more for that. And you're like, oh, well, maybe, what do you mean? I can do this. And maybe it starts a conversation, or maybe you get to ask questions, or maybe hopefully you have questions about some of the stuff we talked about. We talked about cars, we talked about houses, we talked about others. And I hope that you're able to seek those honest conversations about those things. Or maybe when you're looking at, especially students are listening to this, saying, what am I going to do with my life? And instead of asking the question that most people do of, how can I get the most for me? Ask yourself, with whatever I do in my life, how can I continue to love God and love my neighbor and help as much as I possibly can, rather than take as much as I can for myself? And that might mean making a ton of money. Good for you. But being able to use that in such a way that it blesses others. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to us for this episode. A fun one next, episode 9, 8th Commandment, a big one. This is one of those core ones I've been talking about the whole way through, about just so relevant in 2020. Such an important conversation. Hope you guys get to listen. Have questions? Certainly, there's a few things I said I was probably going to get called out for in this one, but definitely communicate with us, touch base with us. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Maybe at the end of this, once all these are released, we'll even be able to do like a questions episode, a Q&A. Would be kind of fun. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. Definitely share this stuff with other folks if it's resonating with you. And we'll see you back for our next episode.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to give us a follow. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, the Trinity Klein app, or both Instagram and YouTube at TK Crew Students. Have a topic in mind you'd like us to use as a theme? Let us know. Let's talk about it. We'll see you next time.